Marco, you can also start with the streaming. Just to welcome everybody, my name is Christy van der Westhuizen. I'm with the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy, and I want to welcome you very heartily to our webinar this afternoon that we are co-hosting with the Department of Public Leadership and Management, Professor Hanyane-Associate. Can I just ask at this point that people just mute their microphones, please? Yeah. So we are here today to talk about the complex topic of local government. Our theme for the afternoon is the political and administrative interface, a hindrance to responsive and responsible local governance. Now, even just in this week, our municipalities have been in the news with the presentation of the Auditor General before the Standing Committee on Public Accounts in Parliament, Takani Maluleke, and she was painting a picture, I have to say, of our municipalities that again reminded us that they are in a quite a dismal state and seriously struggling on a number of fronts, apart from the various news reports that we of course read, the latest ones being on Northwest Province and what's happening there around the withdrawal of clover and so forth and so on. So the Auditor General, just to give you a little bit of an idea, she painted a picture of expenditure at municipalities, saying that there was 26 billion rands in irregular expenditure in municipalities in the 2019-2020 financial year. And this irregular expenditure was incurred in no less than 246 of the 278 municipalities across South Africa. So that is the vast majority of our municipalities, if you think about it, 246 out of 278, where the AG has found irregular expenditure. She says that there was a slight improvement of 5 billion rand in terms of the previously reported amount of irregular expenditure of 32 billion rand in the previous financial year, but that is a tiny improvement. So what we are looking at is, as she was saying, that there's not enough money going around, and that at the same time, she said, we don't have the right hands at the tiller, so to speak. We have something like 27%, therefore over a quarter of municipalities having significant doubts about their ability to continue as going concerns. We also see that only 2% of budget is being spent on maintenance, and 46% used for salaries and remuneration. So that's just to give you a tiny snapshot as came out of the Auditor General's presentation before SCOPA in Parliament this week. So we will be specifically, as I said, speaking on the question of this political and administrative interface. Here in Nelson Mandela Bay, for example, the city manager has just stepped down. It seems it's a result of political pressure. And as we know, city managers are very important people in the administration of our cities, as you know, similar to municipal managers. They are at the heart of governance. They're responsible for the provision of services to the public's satisfaction. And here we see, just in this week here in Nelson Mandela Bay, a city manager stepping down due to political pressure. So it seems our topic is very appropriate for the moment. And I'm very happy to say that we've got the right people to grapple with this this afternoon. Firstly, Mr. Ashraf Adam. He is the Chief Executive Officer at the Mandela Bay Development Agency here in Nelson Mandela Bay. And then we're also very happy to have Dr. Lulamile Hanabe, who's the head of department and the department's called the Strategic Planning and Local Economic Development, and this is in the Raymond and Mhlaba Municipality in Eastern Cape. Unfortunately, our third speaker has taken ill, Professor Rhulani from Northwest University. He has unfortunately not been able to join us today, which is a big pity, and we hope that he will be okay. But fortunately for us, Professor Hanyane-Associate will be stepping in, and she, of course, is somebody who is a specialist in this very area of local government, and she's in the Department of Public Leadership and Management here at Nelson Mandela University. So I'm very glad she's also our co-organizer of this event. I'm very glad Professor Dry is able to step in. So without further ado, let me immediately hand over to Mr. Adam to speak to us. He will address us for about 15 minutes, and then we will move over to Dr. Hanabe and then Professor Dry, and then we'll have, I hope, a lively Q&A of about 25 minutes, where we would invite our audience to participate using the chat function on Zoom. If you just take your cursor and you scroll it, move it down, you'll see there's a chat box in the middle, and you can enter your question there. This is also simultaneously being broadcast on YouTube and Facebook. So we'll be feeding questions through from the audience on those two platforms as well on this chat function. And the questions from here will be going onto those platforms as well. So please start thinking about those questions and comments and enter them into the chat function as our speakers address us. Mr. Adam, please, over to you.
Thank you. And please, you may refer to me as Ashraf. I prefer that. Thank you. Colleagues, thank you very much for this opportunity. And Christie's introduction just reminded me of two things. One, there's a lot of what I won't be able to say given my current position, especially since I'm dealing with a lot of these things at the moment. But sadly, I can't raise that. And the second thing is, you mentioned that the acting city manager having just resigned. You also remember the story of the former city manager who had gone through all kinds of stuff and has just been appointed by the Minister of Finance to go and sort out the municipality in Standerton, where the same kind of issues are being dealt with, where Clover is facing, in that this municipality has 3 large factories which simply cannot close and move on, but their production has been completely halted because of the issues. I'd like to make 5 points, if I may. And the first point is that democracy is messy. And real democracy is even messier, and our democracy is really messy for several reasons. And by the way, I wouldn't have democracy any other way than it being messy. I think our combination of an economic system which is out of sync with what its people needs is an issue. That our development policy, which does not engage with the consequences of that economic system, especially structural unemployment, is a concern. The dumbing down of society through the closure of teachers' training colleges and nursing colleges and this dastardly 30% pass rate. And thirdly, the palliative is instead of future-based policies which try to address apartheid rather than identifying where we want to be as a society in 20, 30 years' time, and then developing policies based on that. And then lastly, locking people into a development model and creating expectations out of that which cannot be delivered on, such as housing, schooling, infrastructure, and so forth. So there are several factors which combine to undermine the democratic process in the context of municipal governance. And councillors face enormous pressure from communities to deal with that in some way or the other. And that pressure is passed on to officials, particularly senior officials, who, having to deal with that pressure, find great difficulty. Some people give in, others resist and are then got rid of or labeled arrogant or sidelined and that kind of stuff. So that's the one issue, that there is a general context which places pressure onto municipalities, and that pressure impacts on the political administrative relationships. The second point is, and as a public official I cannot say too much about this, is that it's about the state of political parties and the ability or inability to rise above patronage, which the don't worry, the state will provide everything kind of approach in trenches. And so it drives to a context where poor provision of services, high demand places on political parties, and the need for jobs or councillor jobs because, with nothing going in, because nothing going around, being a councillor is in fact an income, even if it is for a year or so forth. So that's an issue that does affect the interface. Thirdly, as the front line, municipalities deal with the nexus of those inappropriate policies, slow delivery, bad political leadership, and irate communities. And it's that nexus that where support is needed and where it is not provided. So one would expect that where governance stability is required, that the support services would be appropriate and commensurate. Well, in reality, not a single municipal government support program in this respect exists, and including the DDM. And the DDM will be as unsuccessful as every other program has been. And I'm sorry, my colleague from Raymond Mhlaba, who's dealing with the DDM, in my view, will fail because they are trying to make an IGR system perform with the same people and thinking who have led the system to collapse in the way it is. The fourth point I want to make is that if one looks at post-liberation societies across the globe, this was always going to happen. Whether it is in Africa, Asia, South America, everywhere we have post-liberation societies, or what the academics call post-colonial societies, that the new government in power, the new elites in power create this kind of situation where they promise on the one hand and can't deliver, and the political parties themselves have challenges and splits which they have to manage. And that does impact on local government and local governance and service delivery in a very real way. So that is something that we need to take heed of, and how do we deal with post-liberation challenges in moving ahead. So then my final point is, what can be done about this? I mean, I've deliberately not gone into detail because I just want to raise these issues and discuss them. Well, what can be done? Well, I think firstly, we need to find ways in which officials face consequences for trying to or consorting with politicians, and politicians need to face the consequences of inappropriate interventions. Now, believe it or not, the laws exist. The laws are there, the processes are there, the systems are there. What does happen when you have this kind of inappropriate interaction between politicians and officials is that when the AG comes knocking and things are found to have been not done properly, it is the officials and not the politicians who face the consequences when consequences are faced. I know of no politician that has faced well, there was one in Mthatha. I know of no politician other than the one in Mthatha who has faced the consequences of this kind of challenge. The second point in this is that we need to look at the role of the National School of Government. The National School of Government has really just focused on the national approach to good governance. And they're really looking at good governance as clean governance if you look at their curricular document. Nowhere, well, there is a reference to local government, but nowhere is there reference made to the governance of municipalities in relation to the political admin interface where the challenge really lies. The support is really just more of the platitudes. Yes, we must improve good governance, we must improve systems, and so on and so forth. And I think that the National School of Government really has a significant role to play, because we need to work towards an administration in local government that is really closer to the British model and the Indian model, where an official serves the state, regardless of who runs that state. And so I think that is something that is worth looking at. Thirdly, we need to change the key performance areas of municipalities. If you look at the key performance areas of municipalities, those 5 on local economic development, good governance, financial stability, and financial sustainability, and so forth, institutional development, and I can't remember the 5th one, they are really no longer appropriate. to local government. In fact, what they really do is to entrench the challenges I raised before in terms of commitments made to communities and the inability to meet those commitments. And so the key performance areas of municipalities are actually not impact-driven. They are merely output-driven. You know, have you submitted this report? Have you done this? Have you done that? Not what impacts have been made in communities. And in that respect, I think that if we change that, we also need to change the performance management systems of municipalities. That there is an interface. The accounting officer of a municipality interfaces with the mayor of that municipality to determine that accounting officer's performance management performance requirements for a year and over 5 years. Every year over 5 years. And that is where we need to get the agreements that the performance management should be impact-driven and not output-driven, because it is there where the opportunities for corruption and poor performance come in. And the fourth point I want to make is to encourage local government leadership as a service to communities instead of a job or a salary. That in the public service, one does need to have an ethos of being committed to the community in one way or the other. And if I can just give you a slight aside, I once went to visit an old uncle of my mother in India. And this is when I just started working. And he says, son, he's lying on his deathbed, actually, literally. He says, son, your mother tells me that you work in the public service. And I said, yes, uncle, that's the case. And he says, well, that's all very good and it's very nice. But you know, you're getting married. You actually need to make some money. And I think that is something that we do need to address, that in the public service, you are not going to become rich. You cannot make that an objective of public service. And that's something that we need to encourage in terms of local government leadership. And then finally, we really do need to do away with bad policies. The jargon that gets thrown around, township economic development, local economic development, the ease of doing business, red tape reduction, jargon that comes from other parts of the world that have no relevance and context to South Africa, are really what government, and particularly National Treasury, ironically, is pushing into the local government system. And you find that those things are not applicable, or you don't find success because they have no context to the local area. And so my suggestion is that we need to have a review of development policies in local government so that they become more appropriate to the needs of local government. And then that will help to deal with the tensions. I'm not saying there won't be any tensions, but there will be tensions. There will be tensions, but different kinds of tensions. And you won't have these kinds of tensions where the pressure that politicians face from their communities is transferred into local government administration. So I thought I'd just raise those as introductory points, and we can take some things up in the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ashraf. Really appreciate that. A lot already to mull over and to chew on. And now I'm going to hand over to Dr. Lulamile Hanabe, who is the head of Department Strategic Planning and Local Economic Development at the Raymond Mhlaba Municipality in the Eastern Cape. Over to you, Dr. Hanabe.
Thank you very much, Madam, and good afternoon to you, and good afternoon to the colleagues. Mine, I won't be long. I will just touch on few important issues with regards to the political administrative interface and whether it is a hindrance to the responsive and responsible local government. To start with, my view is that local government is a sphere of government closest to communities. I do not think that it is rated at the level that it should. Secondly, that the provision of services by local government at this point has evolved than the time when the local government started. And thirdly, Madam, the latter speaker is 100% correct that local government is highly regulated, and everybody knows what he or she is supposed to do with regards to persuading what is in the Constitution. But allow me to stress one most important thing as far as the developmental local government is concerned. One of it is that local government should maximize the social and economic growth of the local area. But now you ask your question whether the system of local government allows local government to reach its constitutional mandate, in particular the one that I've just said, that is contained in the white paper on local government. Secondly, the view that I have is that the hindrance as it is perceived, it might be there between politics and administration as far as the mandate is concerned. My view is that there is a relationship issue than anything else. And my view is that there is no hindrance. That's my view. I've been in local government since 2004. As I've evolved and with the local government growing, I realized that the real issue is the relationship that is not properly managed. Either it is by default or either it is by issues of trust or what, but there is a relationship issue. I'll show you why I am saying so. If you're looking at the opportunities of the dichotomy itself, you will realize that the political administrative dichotomy, it promotes the public participation. Remember, councillors, as much as they are political office bearers, but they are representatives of the community. So where I stand, one of the opportunities, it promotes the public participation. And secondly, what it does, it represents an opportunity for combination of political and institutional intervention. And thirdly, it reduces the institutional instability. But there are challenges around it. One of it, there is always a party interest that is over the council business. If I can make a reference, Prof, if you remember, I think in 2008, if my memory serves me correctly, there was an issue with the ATM versus the Mhlaba case, where the then municipal manager was then not appointed because a certain party did not prefer him, but whilst in the interview, the man did well. And then when you look at the relationship then between those that were in authority and those that were outside, but being a political party, they have influence. So you can easily see that one of the challenges is party interest over council business. Secondly, there will always be a political interference. I will demonstrate the difference between the interference and the interface, because most of the time we take interference as interface and take interfaces as the other one. There's also it promotes the vulnerability of a potential regime change. Case in question, I think in Cape Town, another political party won the election whilst there was another municipal manager. Now, when this political party came in, the municipal manager then was forced to leave solely because he was then deemed not to be appointed in a correct way. But when you look at it, it was just an issue of a political regime change. And as he was in the office, it was not possible for him to work freely because of the political or the regime change. Let me take this opportunity and try to clarify the difference between the interference and the interface. I'll tell you why. Because one of the conclusions, one of my proposal is based on this and the system. If you're looking at the interference, it's an act of interfering with something. But if you're looking at the interface, is the point of interconnection between two parties. And a reference is made that if you're looking at the interference of politics in local government, there is a law that says that you should not interfere. If you're looking at Section 117 of the Municipal Finance Management Act, it's clearly that councillors should not form part of the bid committees. And if you're looking at Schedule 1 of the Municipal Systems Act, it clearly tells you what council shouldn't do. But if you're looking at the interface, you're looking at the development of the IDP, the development of the budget, and what is contained in Section 55 of the Municipal Systems Act, the roles and responsibilities of the municipal manager, and how he or she must perform them. You can see clearly how and what we mean by the interface. Now, if we come to the level of answering the question as to whether there is hindrance in the response. As I've said, there is no hindrance, but my view is the system. The last speaker talked about that local government, there are so many policies. That is 100% right, policies that are taken from other countries, 100% right. But my view is that the issue is the local government system. And as a result, I propose that the local government legislation should be looked at. One point in the Municipal Systems Act, if you look at Section 56 of the Municipal Systems Act, it says that the appointment of the managers reporting to the municipal manager shall be done by council in consultation with the municipal manager. But you must ask, then you ask yourself one question: why these guys must appoint a person that is reporting directly to you whilst you are appointed by council? When you look at it, then it shows the story, it tells the story that instead of interfacing with the administration as far as that is concerned, they will end up interfering with that. The second provision, Chairperson, is on Section 139 of the Constitution. Point in question is that there was an issue with the municipality called Mhlaba in the Eastern Cape. The political pressure of the province at the time wanted a regime change as far as who was in charge of the municipality. But unfortunately, the processes that they followed, you could easily see that it was nonetheless of assisting the municipality as far as Section 154 of the Constitution in support of the municipality, but it was more on the monitoring. It was more on pushing a particular political view. So, Chair, if you look at all these, you can see that the issue more than anything else, if the relationships are managed properly, the interface can go very smoothly without the interference. But the system in which local government is built upon, that's where my view the issue is. If there is a change in the system with the review of the laws, I've seen the introduction of the Municipal Finance Management Act. I've seen the introduction of the Municipal Systems Act. But when you look at both, you could easily see that Finance Management Act is more robust in promoting and enhancing the interface than the Municipal Systems Act. So question is that when the state the local government is in now, is it a state where one can say positively and strongly that the system that is used in local government can assist local government in ensuring what is contained in the Constitution is done or not? And my view is that the system is not assisting, but the relationship between the politics and administration, unfortunately, it's inevitable. We cannot separate because of the system that we're using. Remember, we're using a party representative system, and the system itself, it is not assisting. So in a nutshell, Chairperson, if we want to ensure that there's economic development, social and healthy environment, or make sure that there's responsive and responsible local government, or make sure that there's sustainability of services. The issue for me is not to change, or the issue is not the political and administrative dichotomy, but rather it is the system that the local government is using. And if then we can look at changing the system, enhancing the system so that everybody is being accountable. The latter speaker spoke about the performance management. He's right. If you're looking at what age requires, no one at the political level is being accountable, but the administrators and the implementers of the policy are accountable. Then you tend to ask yourself a question, but why there is an issue? The first person who's supposed to be looked at is, why didn't you monitor the very same policy that you have introduced? So it's a system issue more than anything else, Chairperson. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lulamile. That was also very thought-provoking. I see we've got some questions coming in. Please, people, we are very keen to hear from you, and there'll be a Q&A session after our panelists have finished off. So next in turn will be Professor Hanyane Drai. She is an associate professor in the Department of Public Management and Leadership here at Nelson Mandela University. And yeah, over to you, Hanyane.
Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everybody. I will be very brief in my discussion, having been brought on at the 11th hour. Having said that, I think what I would like to do is start with actually the question, do we need local government or not? Particularly given that the challenges of local government in South Africa is widespread, and importantly because these challenges just don't seem to go away. Instead, these challenges are mounting. We live in Port Elizabeth and we can constantly see city decay. And so the question is, what is local government doing about it? And therein lies the rub with regards to what Dr. Hanabe has just said about interference. Interference in the business of local government. Hence, we are not actually seeing progress with regards to just a standard of living, economic development, etc. within our own city. You only have to look on a daily basis. We've painted all the other challenges that we find with local government. And so do we necessarily then need a local government? And if we do, how do we in the future actually turn the conundrum around? And so my argument is this, that yes, of course we need local government. As Dr. Hanabe has already said, it's the closest sphere to the population, where we can actually interact in our own particular quality of life and interest for economic development and social cohesion. So in terms of responsible and responsive governance, as already indicated, many of the policies indicate responsible government and responsible governance. Our policies are very clear. And so where does monitoring and evaluation lie? That is all specified in the various pieces of legislation we have, what council is supposed to do, what the Public Audit Committee is supposed to do. We know all that. The question is it being done? And if it is being done, what is the level of interference? So here's the rub. I contend that our electoral system, we're soon going to be going to elections. Our electoral system, perhaps that should change, for the simple reason that very often the very council that is supposed to be accountable for ensuring that we have change in our city is not always necessarily accountable. For the simple fact that our electoral system allows numerous parties to be part and parcel of the process, such that it actually makes sure that we extend our vote so thinly that our council is then being hamstrung and the actual interface and interference extends in delivering the mandate of local government. That's the first contention I have. The second contention I have is basically that our city managers are being held ransom then by way of the political interference that is actually meted out in our city, in our municipal councils. And this interference impacts on the daily lives of our citizens because budgets are not approved. And if budgets are not approved, then they actually are not aligned to the specific targets of the IDP. The understanding of our officials with regards to what the IDP is actually necessarily about and the relationship between the service delivery improvement budget and that interface in that, rather that interference in that specific area then leads to decay because what it needs to be done is not being done. We all know that the budget for Nelson Mandela in the last 2 years has often been in contention, and service delivery could not actually take place. And service delivery couldn't take place because of the political interference at a very strategic level. So my contention is that going forth, yes, we need local government. We need to turn local government around. And as agreed already, many policies are in existence. Many of these policies are actually not very fruitful because they have to change. And we need to make sure that the political interference is minimized. One, at the very top, where council is accountable for actually delivering services. That is the pinnacle of where decisions are made. So responsive governance. Responsive governance is that space where the citizens are able to encounter the change, that the decisions that are being made at a local municipal council level. Equally, ward councillors, as already has been indicated, ward councillors are pivotal to service delivery and responsive governance. Responsive governance is making sure that citizens are actually able to feel the change and not see the decay that we are currently seeing in our very own city. So, do we need local government? Yes, of course we do need local government. Do we need to enhance skills of officials? Of course we need to enhance the skills of our officials to counteract the level of political interference. I think we fool ourselves if we
Am I the only one who's seen?
Yes.
Now we have lost her.
Okay, and it seems to me Hanyane is frozen. I'm sure she will come back soon. I hope she does. She's been saying some interesting things. Let's just see. I'm sure she will log on soon. So far, we've had very strong points being made, and I'm seeing some convergence also in some of the points that are being made. Ashraf was talking about the whole question of accountability, and which was also raised by Dr. Hanabe around the whole question of civil servants that become, in a sense, or come to be seen as political appointees, while they are actually supposed to be serving government. They should be serving the public as opposed to a political party. So that point has been well made. I see Hanyane is back with us. Hanyane, I was just sort of filling some space.
Thank you. Yes, apologies. I think I just lost connection there, and I won't be much longer. But rather, the point that I think I should stress, and then I will leave it there for now, is the idea around the electoral process. And the fact that we have to rethink our electoral process so as not to reduce the vote to such an extent that local councils are actually hamstrung going into the future, and in the interest of our citizens. Lastly, also, I think the ward councillor system leaves much to be desired, and the ward councillor system seems to encourage the level of interference in the political being and decision making, because, or as already has been indicated, being a ward councillor is perceived not as delivering a service, but rather as a job. And that mentality and that thinking actually hamstrings also, because it is a political appointment. And therein lies the interest of particular ward councillors to continue fostering their political space. And also, many articles have actually proven that ward councillors in themselves have political aspirations going forward. So responsible and responsive governance lies in the fact that our system perhaps needs to be reconfigured, because it does not seem that we're going to be reducing the level of problems experienced at local government. The interference, I would argue, actually translates into, and I know Dr. Hanabe would probably not agree with me, but the level of political interference actually seeps into the interface. So I think what I will do is, before I get thrown off the system again, I will leave it at that for now, and take questions as we go. Thanks, Christy.
Thank you so much, Inalien. And thank you to all three our speakers. As I was saying, we're seeing some convergences in some of the points being made, the one being the politicization of the civil service. And it sounded to me like Ashraf was saying that we actually could do with, if I understood correctly, a legislative change to address this, so that we can prevent this politicization. I don't know if I understood Ashraf correctly. You could perhaps elaborate a bit on that. Then Lulamile was also talking about legislation, in the sense that he was saying that the PFMA is actually a much more robust piece of legislation than your Municipal Management Finance Management Act. So that's something that seems that's, you know, a kind of a nuts and bolts question that can be addressed. And Inalien was raising questions around the electoral system, questions again of accountability, and the fact that we've got, because of the PR system, the proportional representation, we've got too many parties, and which actually enhances the opportunity for interference. And let me leave it at that and go over to our questions. We've got a number of questions here from Amina Sali, particularly to Ashraf. And she was saying that my questions are, you mentioned locking people in a development model within a messy democracy, and that councillors and municipalities face enormous pressure from people. Would you agree that we move to promoting developmental political leadership in ensuring accountability and addressing issues such as corruption and incompetence? So the emphasis here is on it seems to me, developmental leadership. Do you think that the current global pandemic will exacerbate the key KPIs being impact-driven and not output-driven? But I think Ashraf's point was more that we actually need impact-driven reporting as opposed to output-driven, if I understood him correctly. Ashraf, do you want to jump in and address those few questions? More questions will be welcomed.
Yes, and I also have some other points which I'd like to raise, if I may. Firstly, I deliberately started off with the issue of democracy. And in forums such as these, I ask us a very simple question. How many people who are interested in local government and the participatory and effectiveness of local government actually attend IDP and budget meetings in their wards? And I would not be wrong if I said that most people don't. And the excuse given is that, yeah, they discuss all other kinds of stuff and it's not realistic and this, that, and the other. But they are forums of democracy, which we must use and lobby and engage with. And we don't do it, and then we complain. And I think that's a very important aspect to remember, because democracy is the only game in town. And we must not give that up for anything. If we don't participate in those systems, we are actually allowing the very people we are complaining about to get away with that kind of thing. So I think participation in democratic forums and democratic processes is the best way to save, on the one hand, democracy, but on the other hand, to ensure that local government performs. With respect to systems change, a system is only as good as the people managing it. You can change your electoral system, you can change the Municipal Systems Act, the Municipal Finance Management Act, you can do all kinds of stuff. But unless we recognize that the people who manage that system must be up to the standard, we are going to have problems. And by the way, I really agree with that issue of the accounting officer not having a say in the appointment of the people reporting to the accounting officer. I mean, that's an abomination. And I deal with it all the time, actually. So that's something that we need to look at. I also don't have concerns about people wanting to be councillors and so forth. Structural unemployment is a big thing. And structural unemployment amongst people who have very little skills is an even bigger thing. And often, political positions are the only way to get some kind of income. And that is why, in large parts of this country, people kill others to get a seat on the list. And I think we must be mindful of that. So it's not really valuable to say, well, councillors this and councillors that, and it's the only job they can get. But we must understand why that comes from. I now want to go on to the issue of developmental leadership, in a sense. I also used to work with SALGA, and I was involved with councillor training. It's the most ridiculous thing. They get taught the systems, they get taught the laws, they get taught this in a very short space of time. So how much people absorb at the beginning when they are elected as councillors without ongoing training is anyone's guess, firstly. Secondly, the policies and laws that they are meant to apply aren't really worked through in terms of saying, well, this is the law, this is what it means, this is how it impacts in your municipality, these are the issues you are going to be facing. None of that training goes on, and no further training is provided in the term of a local government term. So I think that's something that we need to look at. Yes, I think you were right about the thing about my saying impact driven. So my view is that the issue is not democracy, the issue is not the local government system. The issue is that we have a context in which the local government system operates that is undermining the very objectives it has set for itself. And the way the intergovernmental system is managed is part of that problem. So, for example, the issues up in Northwest with those factories. This is something that should have been identified by the provincial government a long time ago. Where were they? Why were they running around after Clover made its announcement? So it's that kind of thing. And if you go and look at that municipality without having seen it, I can tell you right now, they have a great IDP and they have a great local economic development plan because that's what they are supposed to have. They bear very little context to the work in which they must do. And in that respect, when I talk about the context, it's the development model that says we'll give you free housing, we'll give you free this, we'll give you free that, instead of saying the state will assist people in their own development. That has become the problem. And I think that we have set ourselves up for this kind of failure by not addressing the development model that municipalities are expected to implement. I don't know if I've answered any questions.
I think you broadly did, yes. Thanks, Ashraf. Then there's another question, but I think let's bring Lulamile in. Another question from Amina Sali, where basically asking was saying you touched on two very important concepts: trust and political party regime. This ultimately leads to the quality of the relationships that you referred to. You made reference to a change in political party regime in Cape Town. Would you agree that change in political leadership together with effective systems will have a direct impact on economic development and improving political trust? So it sounds to me like Amina's asking about basically a change in political parties. So in terms of who's actually governing the local government, if I'm understanding her correctly. Yeah, Lulamile, do you want to come in?
Okay, thanks. Look, a change in a political party does not necessarily translate to an improved local economic development, because either one that is at the helm at the time should pursue what is contained in the local government white paper, of which one of it is to maximize local economic development. So it does not necessarily mean, my view is that the relationship issue and the ethical issue as far as the leadership are concerned, and working together with other organs of state, that can mean the change. Remember, those that are at the helm must have an appetite for a particular project. So if one at the helm doesn't have an appetite for a particular project, the same results will be there, irrespective of who below those are in charge. I'll make one example. If today the government can drop the ball on the issue of vaccination, if the government, the leaders can drop the ball, it means that the country can be chaotic. So irrespective of who's there, but if the mandate is still the same and there is a leadership appetite about it. But another point that I wanted to put emphasis on is the change in the local government system, that be an IC system, as Prof has touched on. I'm going to make an example that is closer to PE. If you're looking at this phenomenon called the coalition government, let's take an example in PE. As it's now, there is no provision other than to say, if those that are elected get into council, find majority, they become a majority party. But if there is no majority party, there is no law that says that the IC law does not say, if there is no majority party, you go back to the voters, the ones that were interested in your own manifesto, and ask them, can I form a united government, particular party? There is no law that takes you back to them. Instead, the interest of the parties kicks in and say, I will marry with so-and-so, I will have a relationship with so-and-so to form to form council because we want majority. And when you look at that, then democracy is being undermined by the very same system. So I did not want to touch on that, but now then Mr. Adam has raised that there's no issue with the system. There is an issue with the system. We can go down, we can go to town about it, that the system that we're using in South Africa, as far as local government is concerned, does not allow the local government to meet and to pursue its mandate that is in the Constitution. Thanks.
Okay, some strong words there from Lulamile. I'm finding a question for Inalian here, and it's Janet Cherry saying, we know that at the moment there's a review of the national level electoral system underway, and where it's basically being proposed that what we're doing at local government level must now also be done at national level. And Janet is asking Inalian whether you are basically saying the opposite, that it's actually not such a good system. It shouldn't therefore be adopted actually at national level and should be changed at local level.
Let me start by saying that we are a unitary state, and being a unitary state with certain federal elements does allow us to entertain provincial or provincial specifications. If there's a change in national electoral process, that national electoral process automatically then translates to the province and across the country, because we are a unitary state. I think the point that I want to make is, we spoke about policies and how things should be changed. Do we keep the proportional representation system? If it is working for us, fair enough. But Lulamile has just pointed out, coalition government upon coalition government is not working, because coalition governments are actually not delivering on the mandate of local government. Coalition government is in self-interest and party political patronage. And if we have to recognize that that is actually keeping local government hamstrung. Therefore, if at national level we are going to streamline, if we can streamline our proportional representation in the best interest of the electorate, then I would be all for it and say, right, put in place, revise our policy, our electoral policies, so that if we're going to keep the system, at the very best, it serves the people. At the moment, our electoral system at local government is not serving the people. You cannot have a party that has 1% of the vote actually dictating what is happening in council, and then also dictating the status quo of the city, so much so that the city then actually lapses into decay. I want to also make the point about ward councillors, and I want to make the point about structural unemployment. It is a given that we have structural unemployment, but I think in terms, just to go back to Ashraf's point, in terms of the mindset of why councillors are actually part and parcel of the milieu, is that they are there to serve the people. And it is that distinction that needs to be made, and it's a very noble cause. The fine line between it being a job and actually serving the community. And to what extent then do we minimize the political interference? Is it even possible? It would be possible if that fine line is maintained between political, rather the public service being served, as well as political interest. At the moment, it seems though that the political interest is actually superseding the public interest. So I leave it there. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Inaline. I want to bring in the people, the public that our municipalities are supposed to serve. This question from Amina, where, how do we make sense of service delivery protests? She gives a stat there that there were 909 protest actions between the 1st of August 2020 and 31 January 2021. And that was, as we know, in the middle of a pandemic and with a lockdown. So people are basically, in a sense, risking their lives to voice their outrage and their unhappiness. So our three speakers, I want to ask you, how do you interpret service delivery protests? And also, it does seem as though these protests are not having the desired impact, because we do not see, we've now heard from all of you in various ways about the problem of a lack of political accountability, and we're not seeing a responsiveness to these service delivery protests. Ashraf, shall we start with you?
Thank you. Yeah, okay. I'll start with by answering some of your questions. Firstly, I believe that the service delivery protests in South Africa are not service delivery protests. They are, at one stage, I believed they were part of a third force kind of intervention, because it's the same with the taxi violence. It switches on, switches off. Service delivery protests get switched on, get switched off, and they come at particular points in time. Whether they are third force activities, I have no evidence for, but the fact that they are switched on and switched off at particular points in time does make one wonder why. Now, I think the issue of service delivery protests is directly linked to the two things. One, the scramble to be influential people in communities so that you can get a list on a party seat. And secondly, the way in which services get delivered in municipalities. that gives rise to protests. And if I may give you one example, in New Brighton, which is, I believe we have people from other parts of the country on this talk, so it's the oldest township in Quebeja. In New Brighton, we've been working very closely with some of the really good councillors, ward councillors and PR councillors who are deeply committed to the ward and have been respected as such. And when the planning work was being done and the consultation work was being done, all that was all well and fine. The moment contracts were being issued, the councillors themselves became aggressive towards us and accused us of not being interested in service delivery in that township. When we investigated, this was what was happening. That small businesses, some of them just established at the moment, were pressurizing councillors with all kinds of things so that they would ensure that the councillors allocate the work to them. They would ensure that the councillors pressurize the MBDA to give the work to them. And it took an extraordinary challenge and effort, because some of our staff actually got death threats as a result of this, to sit down with the councillors and say, councillors, you are not allowed to do what you are doing. It is illegal. Please, can we ask you not to pressurize us on these things? Then we had to meet with the SMMEs, some of whom are gangsters, and say, listen, if you continue to do this kind of thing, we are simply going to pull out of New Brighton, take all our resources and move on somewhere else. Now, those are the things that if you don't address them in the head-on kind of way, lead to service delivery protests, because we've got to call the bluff of people who are creating the challenge, they're creating the tensions, creating the issues, and because they're doing it for their own gain. They're not doing it for the community as we understand the community to be. So we need to also identify people who act in self-interest and are able to get people to rally around them. So that's an important aspect to look at. Another aspect to look at is the issue of the model of service delivery and how that exacerbates service delivery protests. The state is not doing 20%, and I'm just sucking it out of my thumb because I can't think of anything else. They're not doing 20% of what is committed to in municipalities. Money gets budgeted, money gets allocated, money gets put there, but the system doesn't deal with it. Now, I know that there are certain aspects of the system that must be changed. The supply chain management system must change, the accountability system must change, and a whole range of things must change. But unless we begin to look at the way in which we're approaching service delivery and not bringing people into the delivery of their own services, as we talk about the development of people themselves and the state supporting it, we're going to be on this treadmill where you have an incapacitated state, local state, unable to deal with a very high level of commitments that incapacitated state is making. It's a recipe for service delivery protests. So if we begin to engage with people around service delivery, we are certainly going to be, around service delivery, we are certainly going to be able to take out a lot of the tension, because you need to bring people more into that. And it is possible. The MBDA does try and do that. And we have found when we do that, it's difficult in the beginning, really difficult in the beginning, because you have to take the decision that we will take gangsters and we will train them to be contractors, construction people. You've got to be able to make that decision, that it's not a straight trajectory that you're on, that there are very, very many different ways you're going to have to approach development. And you must recognize structural unemployment. You must recognize gangsterism. You must recognize structural violence in communities and why people resort to violence so easily, and work within that context. So it's not that it is happening. It will happen if we continue on the same path. And that's my concern. If I just want to address one more point, and that's the point, Raymond.
Just make that a brief one, because we're running
Yes, it will be a brief one. It will be a brief one, because it's again about democracy. Proportional representation is a democratic, is an enhancement of democracy. It was brought in at the start of the negotiations around the Constitution to recognize that you want to create as many voices as possible to serve in the legislatures. Now, the fact that one party and one person can swing things is not the fault of the system. It's the fault of the other parties not bringing their voters to the polls. It's those kinds of things. So I don't think we should blame the system for other issues. And that's my plea.
Thank you. Thank you. That's something for Inalien to respond to as well, I think. And I don't want to load too much, but we did not come to some of the very interesting questions here. But we have addressed the question of councillors that are apparently more into the business of peddling influence and getting a salary than in service delivery. There's a question from Thuli around, what is hindering policy reforms? Lulamile, you may want to address that. Is it a problem with stakeholders, a problem with coordination? She says, I'm struggling to pin this issue down, and I think this is something that we share about this whole question of local government, that it's very difficult to pin down. And Inalien, if you want to just speak to the question of the ward committee system as well. We are running out of time, so if you can both just keep it brief. Let's start with you, Lulamile.
Thanks. Let me just to run through the first question that you asked. Some are very much they're political, some are very much legitimate, and some are purely based on the empty promises. But there's another one point that I want to bring to the table, is the culture of solving all problems using the same way. We have not evolved as a country on how we solve our problems. One example, you burn a tire today on a tar, the next day it becomes a potholes, and so we have not done that. But another important point is that I don't think communities fully understand how government works. Sometimes. Let me come to the part of the policy reforms hindrances. Look, my view, South Africa is in particular local government is highly regulated. But at some point, I don't think that the solutions that we're bringing, as Adams was saying, that are relevant to the situation that we have in the country. But one of the hindrances now that we have as far as the policies are concerned, we're too much democratic. Let me just end it. Sometimes we're too much democratic. Let me end it. Okay, thanks.
I don't think you can end on that one, Lulamile. Can you just say another two sentences to explain? Because we did actually have Wonga. Wonga actually earlier said, the political system needs to change, local government needs to change, the ward council system needs to change, and then democratic systems. I was wondering if he's like questioning, should we even have this democratic system? But it sounds like you are saying something in that.
Yeah, let me not leave it. I'll make one simple example. Communities, in order for government to work, in particular local government, in order for this sphere of government to work, this particular sphere needs money. And if you're looking at the laws that govern, in particular, those that encourage, not to say encourage people not to pay, but at some point, municipalities are unable to perform their mandate solely because they don't have money. And the money is sitting with us. I'm not going to mention the municipality now. Government is owing a particular municipality 490 million rand. The democratic level that I'm bringing is, it's difficult for government to take government to court. That is number one. Two, you found out that residents that are able to pay are not paying. And it is difficult for government to do more than to say pay. So it's one of the things that the system itself, we're too democratic at some point. Those that are supposed to pay must pay their bills for government to run. You cannot claim that I'm a resident, I need electricity, whilst the reticulation is old and you are not paying your part. So that's the too much democracy that I was trying to, we're too lenient, to be honest with you, at some given point. Thanks.
I disagree.
Thanks. have made this 2 hours, actually. Inalia?
I'll be very brief, and I want to almost latch on to what Lulamile has just mentioned. I think citizens, by their very nature, have disempowered themselves. First of all, our policies have disempowered because it is what government can do for me. It's never what I can do for government. And so let me also just say that the ward council system is actually a very noble system. But the level of co-production between the citizens and the ward councillors is only comes to fruition, as already has been indicated by Mr. Adam. And so there's never a constant question of the self, of what can I do for my government to enhance my own socio-economic space. Granted, we have structural unemployment, but it seems as though citizens have been disempowered as well, vis-a-vis our local government policies, vis-a-vis our local government structure, and vis-a-vis our political system as well. The level of interest in the affairs of government and going to the polls, because in over the past few years, there has been a significant decline in citizens actually going to the polls to vote for local government. Now that then shows that there's a level of disempowerment of citizens for a number of reasons, city decay, etc. But the fact that local government is actually not able to convey its mandate and actually capitalize on its mandate, and much as the ward council system is a noble cause, it is that level of lack of co-production between citizens and the political system, if you wish. And then also lastly, capacity at local government. Capacity, but more than capacity, the skill and competence of local government. That does not negate that they are exceptionally competent and skilled individuals. But when citizen disempowerment actually comes from observing that service delivery is not taking place. So in conclusion, Mr. Ashraf has mentioned service delivery protests. It's a given. There are a lot of factors why service delivery protests occur, being the criminal element, being the structural unemployment, but also the fact that citizens are actually disempowered. Let me stop there. Okay.
Thank you so much. And unfortunately, we couldn't get to Alan Zinn's question about the time that it takes for the professionalization of a civil service. Sorry about that, Alan. We just completely ran out of time here. So, but I'm sure that yeah, we'll. It seems to me we'll have to arrange another conversation like this. So it's been very lively. Thank you to everybody. I want to hand over to Dr. Ulutubi Akingbadi, who is postdoctoral research fellow with the research program at the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy, who did a lot of the heavy lifting with this event.
Thank you so much, Professor Christy van der Westhuizen. Thanks so much, everyone, for joining us at this very important webinar. There's been quite a huge food for thought there. Thanks so much. And most especially, I want to say quickly that on behalf of the Department of Public Management and Leadership, and also on behalf of the Center for the Advancement of Non-Racialism and Democracy, I want to specially and warmly thank our speakers for taking our time to be part of this very important webinar, very important dialogue and provocative conversation that we've had. A very big thanks to Mr. Ashraf Adam, the CEO of Mandela Bay Development Agency. Thanks so much for being part of this, this webinar today. To Dr. Lulamile Hanabe, the HOD Strategic Planning and Local Economic Development for Raymond Mhlaba Municipality. Thanks so much for being part of this event. And also to our own Professor Enalin Dry, an Associate Professor in the Department of Public Management and Leadership. Thanks so much, Professor, for being for giving us those provocative thoughts also. and also to the head of research program here at CANRAD, Professor Christy van der Westhuizen. Thanks so much for beautifully moderating this event. Thanks everyone for being part of this event. And before we log off, can I just say we quickly turn on our cameras and just say a virtual bye-bye if that is possible. You can even switch off your mic if you want to say a virtual bye-bye. Thanks so much for being part of this event. And we continue to hope for the best in our democracy, hope for the best in our municipality, hope for the best in the country, and hope for the best on the continent. Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks for being part of this event.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye,
everyone.
Bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.